We're going to talk about Reddit. Dan, are you a Redditor? Do you use Reddit?
I am a bit of a lurker on Reddit. I'm not overly active in contributing to Reddit. I think Reddit is kind of like one of those. It's become so big. I feel like it gets labelled with an identity, but really it's just like any suitably large community. There are pockets of goodness and pockets of terribleness, and
Oh, there's pockets of terribleness, all right.
There's lots of scope on Reddit.
Okay, well, those of you who don't know, Reddit's a social network that specialises in aggregation of content, which basically means it gathers material from across the internet and allows users to upvote it into popularity, downvote it into obscurity, and comment on it extensively. It's often thought of as being outside the traditional list of social networks, but there are approximately 52 million so-called Redditors browsing the site on a daily basis. And for some users, particularly in this kind of 25 to 29 age bracket, this is a site that dominates their social activity. It's the one they use the most, racking up loads of hours every week. So with that in mind, it's not surprising that Reddit has a thriving community of gaming fans, creators, and aficionados. And for today's show, and we're also doing this on the blog as well, so you'll be able to read this back later, we wanted to crunch some numbers based on one popular gaming subreddit, which is a section of the site dedicated entirely to games. For the purposes of this, we used r/games, which is a part of Reddit that has around 3 million users. It isn't the most popular gaming subreddit, which will be r/gaming, but r/gaming has loads of memes and other stuff that just gets in the way of the data, whereas games is a bit more focused. So they have some news stories in there, but also they share a lot of trailers with no other context, just here's a new game, check it out. So we looked at that and we established what 10 of the most successful posts ever were, from original IP right through to things that are well established, and we've ranked them on our blog and given them a little blurb and talked about why each one's so successful. What I wanted to do with you here today, Dan, is just pick out a few of the titles that we're talking about in the blog, give you a little flavour of the blog, and share some of those lessons, and also give some generic Reddit tips at the end as well. So if you are looking to succeed on Reddit, this is the video segment that you need. Sound good?
Sounds excellent.
Cool.
Hit me with it.
I'm glad, because I spent at least 15 minutes putting this together. First up, we've got No Man's Sky, and the trailer in question here is actually the trailer of one of their updates, titled The Next Update. There have actually been a bunch of updates of No Man's Sky, including one this week. Congratulations to everyone at Hello Games. But No Man's Sky, if you're not familiar with the story, was a huge title, and still is a huge title. It spans a procedurally generated universe, and when it launched, it wasn't exactly what some fans expected. There was a powerful reaction online. Obviously, the game is very ambitious, and they would admit that themselves. One feature in particular that players were anxious for and keen to see was multiplayer, and this update was the update that introduced it, causing a huge swell of support for the game as it continued to evolve and iterate and go through that kind of redemption arc that they went through. And it's still being updated today, like I say, so they're doing a really good job. I think the takeaway from this trailer is pretty clear. I mean, it's a very well-made trailer, it's a fantastic trailer, great music, great editing, but it succeeds mostly because of what it represents, and what it represents is players getting what they want. So you might not be No Man's Sky, very few games are, but lots of games, whether they're in early access or they're, just in the wish list stage, there'll be fans out there who are clamouring for specific features, and when you add those features, it's a good idea to try and call them out. So when you're going to do a trailer, if you know you've got a line item that's going to tick the box for loads of players and loads of fans that are desperate for this feature, make sure you highlight it, make sure you include it, feature it prominently in your trailer, and that's what Hello Games did so well with this trailer and why it was such a big deal on Reddit. Dan, what do you make of this trailer?
Yeah, brilliant trailer, extremely well received, like you say, and I think No Man's Sky is one of those titles that they, exactly as you say, they listen to their audience, and I think they put themselves in a great position where actually I think what the team wants is often very aligned with what the community want. We all know there are restrictions and limitations to what can literally be done in the time available, but also they're not just complete. They have their own ideas and ambitions as well that also get threaded into these updates. So it really is kind of like that perfect storm of giving the audience what they want, but also that whole kind of if you ask people what they want, they'd have said a faster horse, and they've got that creativity and we're obviously big fans, but yeah, this was definitely a seminal moment in the many updates that they've done. So yeah, great trailer.
The next trailer I want to highlight, and I should clarify, this isn't the full top 10, and they're not in order. So if you want to read the full top 10 in order, you'll have to read the blog, which we will share on Twitter probably tomorrow. Maybe later today, see how we feel. Next up, though, is Labo, Nintendo Labo. So this is the platform that Nintendo launched, which allows you to create your own wacky controllers out of cardboard and plug parts of your Switch into it to make fairly unique gaming experiences. And I think the key takeaway with this one that we want to talk about is about how you present originality. Originality is almost always good. You know, every huge franchise started as an original idea one day, and carving out a marketing niche is easier when you've got something unique, something you can talk about extensively that differentiates you from everyone else in the marketplace. But I think the key thing that Nintendo have, and they have this in spades, and not every studio has this luxury, is when Nintendo launches something, you believe in it, that you believe that Nintendo can back up their original ideas with an implementation that actually works. So whenever you go down this road of being fiercely original, fiercely unique, fiercely carving out your own identity, you have to make players believe that you can back it up. So it's not enough just to be a massive dreamer. You have to be able to say, and this is a thing you can actually do. Like, this is actually going to work. So a textbook example of Nintendo pulling this off with success was Labo. They launched this, and the trailer was a huge hit on Reddit. People were very excited about the theoretical possibilities of this, and also just that backing that Nintendo provide. You feel like you're in safe hands with the big red house of Nintendo. Dan, what do you make of this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, very much the opposite to the point you were making a minute ago. I don't think anybody was asking for some cardboard shape-building add-ons to their Nintendo Switch, but it was very, very Nintendo. This was fairly early on in the Switch life cycle, and there was sort of like, what are Nintendo going to bring to us next? And I can't imagine there was anybody putting their money on it being Labo
cardboard.
And I think that as much as I don't know how commercially successful, like, we don't see or hear a lot about Labo now, but at the time, just the sheer conversation that happened, because this was just like, what is this? Why? What? Nobody was expecting this, and just the conversation around Nintendo and the Switch would have undoubtedly been hugely beneficial for just general Switch sales. Very, very cool.
Talking of things that were very popular in trailer form and maybe not as popular when they came out, the next one is Fallout 76, and there's a few of these in the list that are like this, trailers that created incredible amounts of hype, and then potentially the game didn't quite live up to that when it came out. In Fallout 76's case, the teaser's a good one, and it hits all the notes that fans of Fallout 3 and 4 would have wanted to see. It's got those familiar musical sounds, visual cues, and references throughout to the game world they've established. And like I say, whether the game lived up to that at the end is debatable, but one thing is for sure, when people played Fallout, saw this, it got them really excited. People who were Fallout fans were so hyped when they saw this trailer. They were so excited by just these little references and nods to the franchise that they know and love at that point. And I think that's something that you have to be aware of. Like, you're not necessarily always going to be in a pitched position where you're trading on nostalgia like Fallout can, or like some of the major IPs can, but you're always trying to evoke a feeling, and Fallout's trailers evoke the feeling of playing a Fallout, which is so critical. We talk about the extended experience here at Edge Play, and about how taking what makes your game feel special, that tone, and imbuing everything with that just makes it all feel like one cohesive experience that was planned. And I think Fallout have really nailed that over the last few years with Fallout Shelter and their trailers. And this trailer is, a huge part of that. I think it was such a success. Whether the game stuck the landing, I mean, I've heard it's really good now. I've heard if you've got Game Pass, you should check it out. I've heard they've updated it loads. But a fascinating case study in how to create a lot of hype very quickly from Bethesda. What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, absolutely dialed into what is Fallout, and I guess Fallout 4 and Fallout Shelter and everything around that. We've talked about it before, like such a successful launch and kind of narrative, world building in and around the game. This trailer really kind of leapt off from that high point. It's interesting, thinking about this, about No Man's Sky, like you're just saying. The game is now been much better perceived, I believe. We're kind of getting a little bit more used to these we talk a lot about long life games, so games that are launched at a certain state with the full intention that this game is going to evolve and grow. And I wonder if there's a certain amount of conditioning happening with audiences that you aren't going to get everything out of the box on day one, but trust in the developers. They've got a long roadmap. We're seeing it with Sea of Thieves as well. You could say a similar reaction there. There's lots of instances of this happening, and you've got to create a splash with your trailer. You can't temper expectation because we're going to be developing this game for the next 5 to 10 years. So let's not get people too excited. No, we want to get as much attention as possible. So maybe it's just an evolution of the kind of the hype setting and conditioning the audience to expect to kind of temper their expectations themselves and just learn to trust the devs.
We're not going to talk about it on the show, but if you read the full blog, you will find out that one of our entries starts with cyber and ends with punk. And that's another fascinating case study.
Example, yeah.
Last one then, before we wrap up here, is HalfLife Alyx. It might not be Half-Life 3, but it's the next best thing. And the angle of it being a virtual reality title generated loads of intrigue and excitement. There are few, if any, games like Half-Life out there in terms of brand loyalty. But this trailer, and I think you mentioned this, Dan, you were talking about how No Man's Sky, they deliver on what fans want, but on their own terms, in their own way, with their own spin on it. People have been talking about Half-Life 3 or a new Half-Life for years. It was almost a joke that it was never going to come out, right? There were people like, Half-Life 3 is just doesn't exist. It's never going to exist. Valve can't count to 3. And they still can't, because they called it Half-Life Alyx. But they did give people a little bit of what they wanted, wrapped up in a lot of what Valve wanted to do. And the game is, by all accounts, an excellent game, one of the premier VR titles available. Obviously, that's not necessarily easy for everyone to play in their own home with their own setups, but this trailer did a great job of bringing the dream to life, showing people what this VR title could be like and is like for people who have room scale VR in their homes. What do you make of this one, Dan?
Yeah, I think this was a brave move, because if you were ever going to say like, oh, let's give the people what we want, Half-Life is one of the franchises that you're playing a very dicey game with. So I think they did extremely well too, and that they got the trailer right and got people excited, not only for Half-Life Alyx, but actually maybe this was at the point where the buzz of VR was maybe the gleam was starting to wear off a little bit, and I think this injected a resurgence of enthusiasm for VR at the time. So yeah, very brave move, but very well executed.
I agree. We've got some generic tips for you about Reddit as well. So if you're thinking you want to post on Reddit, you want to post your trailer, obviously if everything was going well, somebody else would be posting your trailer for you. But maybe you're quite a small outfit, maybe your game's not out there yet, and you want to post on Reddit, you are welcome to do so. But there are some things you should know. First generic tip is to always know your communities and learn their rules and abide by them. Every subreddit is what they're called, has its own way of doing things. There'll be some subreddits that take a very dim view of self-promotion. There'll be others where it's allowed, as long as you're very clear about it. And there'll be others where they're just open season, do what you want. So make sure wherever you're going to post, you've read their rules, you understand them, you understand the etiquette of posting in that particular subreddit. Research suggests that the best post titles are between 20 and 80 characters in length, so use them wisely, is this top tip. You might need to mention the title of your game based on the subreddit's rules, but if not, save the characters and use them to say something else instead. So people talk about an elevator pitch. This is a hyper-focused version of that. This is your 20-character pitch. How can you describe your game in just a few words and really sum up that unique selling point that's going to get people interested in watching this trailer? So bear that in mind. According to research, the best times to post are in the mornings on weekends and Mondays, and that's based on the American time zones. So, pick one, East Coast, West Coast, or the middle, and react accordingly. And the key thing, and we always say this about social networks, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, any of them, give it a try and measure your results. You can tweak future posts and trailers to try and zero in on the best results for you over time. So the key thing is not to avoid it, but to start doing it and learn by doing. Would you agree with all those top tips, Dan?
Yep, very much so. I would add I think there's an element of humility that you can bring, certainly for the smaller titles. Reddit is a very useful community, and people they like to be asked for advice and opinion. So if you are trying to introduce a new, your new title or trailer, and maybe you don't have the existing fan base or audience, rather than check this out, you're going to love it, frame it as I'd really appreciate some feedback, or what are your thoughts on this, or any ways I can improve this. And I think that community is used to answering those kinds of questions, and perhaps you might get a little bit more traction.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me, Dan.
Thank you very much for having me.